So, if you are watching this video, more than likely you are either interested in or contemplating the idea of getting a switch barrel rifle, switch barrel precision rifle of some sort, or you may already own one. And a lot of the things that we're going to be going over are some of the commonalities between them, some of the pitfalls, or not necessarily pitfalls, but some of the things that are, I guess you would say, are somewhat less desirable about them. As well as going over, common misconceptions, the benefits of owning one, the overall construction again, and in a video right after this one, we're going to wind up doing another one, is going through and setting up the ballistics solvers for a switch barrel rifle and how to do it, at least the most efficient way I have found to do it. So we'll jump right into it. First off, misconceptions. That would be the zero and the overall accuracy. So one of the things that I was concerned about whenever I was looking at getting a switch barrel rifle was losing the overall accuracy. And I had multiple different custom rifles built to do very specific things, all in different calibers. They all had their own either stock or chassis. They all had their own trigger, their own actions, their own scope rings, bipods, you name it. They all had their own setup. Basically, they were complete rifles. As far as overall accuracy is concerned, I'm here to tell you that any of these switch barrels is absolutely capable of keeping up with pretty much any one-off custom in terms of accuracy, whether it be from either Accuracy International, Seekins Precision, the Barrett MRADs, and even Desert Tech. They're all top-notch in terms of accuracy and what they can do. 99% of all that actually ends up being shooter. So anyway, as far as overall accuracy is concerned, there is no downside to going with a switch barrel at all. So there's no reason to be concerned about it. And that was, like I said, for me that was one of my biggest concerns. But I'm here to tell you there's no need to be worried. The other misconception is that you could take one of these barrels or one of these rifles, swap the barrel out in it, and the other barrel will just magically have the same exact zero as the one that was originally zeroed with. In other words, the optic was zeroed with. And that is just not how it works at all. I know some of you watching are probably thinking, well, duh. But what I can say, though, is per each individual barrel, that zero is extremely consistent. So in other words, if I was to take the barrel out of this rifle or that rifle or even that one down there and then put it right back in the rifle, or take the barrel out and then put it right back in, at least for these three sitting here, you probably wouldn't know a difference. And that's saying a lot, considering the fact that you can take the barrel out and put it back in under 2 minutes for any of these. So the zero and point of shift, or point of impact shift, is going to be different per each barrel. So if you have, like for this one, that's got the 300 Norma Mag barrel in it, and I've got 6 different barrels to choose from for it back here. If I stuck my 18-inch 308 barrel in it, the two are going to have 2 separate zeros. But there's also a workaround for that as far as like your ballistic solvers or your Kestrel 5700 Elite is concerned. It just goes into how you set up the profiles per each barrel. And we'll get into that in a second video. The benefits of having a switch barrel. Well, some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them not so obvious. One of those is actually cleaning and ease of maintenance. So you can literally snatch the barrel out of it and stick an earplug in the end of it if it's really copper fouled, and you can basically fill the barrel up from the chamber end and stand it up in the corner with an earplug in the muzzle end, and let that copper solvent just sit in there and just do its job and not have to worry about it. For solvents, I like to use like Vortex and stuff like that because they don't hurt the gun, or they don't hurt the barrel at least. So, and that's common across all of them, whether it be Desert Tech, Barrett, Accuracy International, and the Seekins hit down here. So that is one unforeseen benefit to a switch barrel. The other would be commonality. So if I was again to take this rifle, say I wanted to go hog hunting with it, and I wanted to do, and I knew already that I wasn't going to be taking super long shots, and I wanted to be fairly quiet about it, not piss maybe the neighbors off or something of that nature. I could screw my suppressor onto that barrel, have a much shorter overall package. But the other benefit to that is, I'm used to the rifle. I'm extraordinarily accustomed to it. You're always dealing with the same trigger, same action, same optic. The butt, basically everything on the buttstock is going to be set up the same for you all the time. So it makes all that stuff really easy to get it set up for you, and it'll always feel like a good old pair of shoes that you've had for a long time when you got them really broken in. So you'll always be accustomed to it, no matter what. The other benefits being the fact that you don't have to have an extra chassis, an extra barrel, an extra action, an extra trigger, an extra optic, an extra optic mount, whether that be rings or like a spur mount like these have, different bipod, all that kind of stuff. And just to give you an idea of how quick that adds up, this rifle itself, it was the first switch barrel that I bought. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Anyway, I bought this rifle, I think back in 2019. And I want to say I paid somewhere around $8,000 for it. So yeah, it's a very steep price tag, and that was the other thing that you have to kind of realize out of the gate. Yes, they have some of them at least have a really big entry cost. There's a huge entry fee that's associated with it. But this rifle here, I have a total of 6 barrels for this one rifle. And to give you an idea of how quickly adding extra barrels, if you look at the barrels as complete rifles themselves, how quickly it adds up. So if I had to buy, just say for instance, either 6 Leopold Mark 5s, 5 to 25s, and I'm paying around, just say around $2,000 each, or maybe even not this exact same scope, but some that are in basically that same rough ballpark in terms of price. You're looking at $12,000 if all 6 barrels were set up as complete rifles. You're looking at just $12,000 in optics alone for those 6 barrels. So I basically got one gun that can do the job of 6 completely different guns. And since it's a switch barrel, simply in optics alone, that's $12,000 in optics. Not including mounts, not including triggers, not including actions, you name it, or chassis, or stocks, or whatever. So the benefits of having something like this, if you are used to having, or think you'll wind up having, multiple different rifles, is huge. There's a lot of benefits to it. If you're somebody who's maybe building 1 or 2 rifles, it's kind of a toss-up. Whenever you start talking about 6 or more, yeah, it's just way easily pays for itself in the long run. On top of all the benefits that come with it. So, let's see. What's another thing that I need to go over here? Overall construction. So, due to like patent infringement and stuff like that, there are certain things that have to be done for other companies, or other companies approach an issue in different ways to try and keep from, number one, having any kind of patent infringement or copyright infringement, whatever you want to call it. So they have to come up with their own way of doing things. Some of them are really good. Some of them, I would say, may not be as good as others. But again, this is not me. I'm absolutely not out bashing any other company's rifles at all. Yes, I bought both of these two rifles here myself personally. And yeah, they were extraordinarily expensive. But in terms of the companies themselves, I wouldn't care if this rifle was actually made by, I don't know, geez, like Savage or something like that. The brand to me is irrelevant. I don't really care about, you know, the brand or the exclusivity to owning an Accuracy International anywhere near as much as I do about how this rifle functions and works. It could be a Rossi. I really don't care. Or a Harrington Richardson rifle. You know, I really don't care. What matters to me is how the rifle performs and how good it is at doing what I need it to do. So there are some pros and cons in going with other brands, which I guess we'll go ahead and get into that. For the barrels themselves, okay. So this is a good example of how all three of these rifles are actually done. Pull one of these barrels out here so you can see it. It looks just like a typical, you know, just typical barrel. There's nothing crazy going on. It's got threads on both ends. It's got a shoulder up here where it shoulders up against the action, and that's true for all three of these rifles. They're all set up this way, and there's nothing else to contend with. Now, for like your Barrett MRADs and your Desert Techs, you're going to have or you're going to have to source basically a barrel extension, which is going to also have to go on the end of the rifle here. So on top of like the price of your barrel blank, if you're having a smith do a barrel for you, that's another cost that you're going to have to add in there. I want to say the Desert Techs are around $375 to $400 per barrel extension, so that's $375 to $400 for the barrel extension itself, which for a good blank, that's almost the price of a whole blank. For the Barrett MRAD, it's going to be much the same. You're going to have to source a barrel extension to go on them as well. So that's just an additional cost that you need to be aware of. And I think the Barrett MRAD, I think they call it a builder's kit. It's somewhere around, I think it's around $450. And if they're out of stock, you're kind of SOL, kind of like they are right now. But that's something else that you have to contend with, on top of the price of, you know, the gunsmithing work, on top of the price of the barrel blank itself. That's a whole nother cost that's associated with doing either a custom one-off barrel from them, or you might just pick up a direct factory replacement. And there's nothing wrong with that, but be aware that if you want to do anything that's, I guess, quote unquote, out of the norm, or something that they don't necessarily offer, it's going to be harder to do that. Also, you need to make sure that you use a gunsmith who is set up and accustomed to doing that. Pretty much any gunsmith who's halfway worth their salt, for any three of these rifles here at least, it would be no different of an affair than to basically change a barrel out in a Remington 700. You know, it's for the Accuracy Internationals, they're both metric threads. And another thing that's somewhat screwy for the Accuracy International is some of the barrels that you'll run across will have either metric or standard muzzle threads. So that's another thing that you have to kind of watch out for. But again, like I said, if you want to do something that's custom, that's somewhat one-off, say you've got a Wildcat cartridge that you want to try, or there's a a bullet that you want to try that requires a tighter than normal twist rate even. It's going to be hard to try and convince probably Barrett or Desert Tech to just make you a barrel that way. They may, I'm not sure. I've never had to personally contend with them, but there are custom, or there's gunsmiths out there that could do a custom barrel for them. Just bear in mind that there's going to be added expenses to add barrels to the Desert Techs and the Barrett MRADs that you wouldn't necessarily have with barrels that are set up this way. So again, this is a custom one-off barrel that's in this rifle. This is a 30-inch 8-twist. Let's see, 30-inch. It's a 30-inch long 8-twist Bartline blank that was spun up for me by the guys over at Mile High Shooting. It's chambered in 300 Norma mag. It is also throated much longer than a standard Norma mag chamber would probably normally be throated. And that's because I wanted to be able to shoot the 250 grain or the 245 grain bullets through it, either the Hornady or the Burger. And funny enough, it actually ended up liking the 230 grain Hornady A-tips the most. And they scream coming out of this thing. They're around 31-40 feet per second, so it's pretty wicked, especially for no bigger than the cartridge is. But that's something that you really need to be aware of going into them beforehand. The Seekins down there, it's really no different. It uses standard threads on both ends, but it's set up in most the same way, and you don't have to have a barrel extension or anything like that. That's an added cost for them either. Moving forward from that, let's see. So the gunsmithing, the mags. Well, if you don't already know, which you should, there's a reason that Accuracy International mags have the reputation that they do. They're extraordinarily good. As far as I know, nobody's had any complaints with the Barrett MRAD mags. They work extremely well. The Seekins down here, it uses Accuracy International mags as well. If that speaks to the reputation of Accuracy International mags themselves. I think the Barretts are basically their own design, but I haven't heard any complaints out of those. The Desert Techs, I don't know if they've fixed any of the issues that they've had with their mags. I know some of the, especially like the HTI mags, the follower, it tilts really bad, so you can, the rounds can get in there and get all cocked and messed up, and you have problems with them cycling. Another thing that's really important about the rifle and the way you interface with it is how adjustable it is. Well, I would have to give the nod probably to Accuracy International in the amount of adjustability it actually has. The cheek rest moves up and down a considerable amount. I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it also moves left and right. Everything but the left and right movement on the cheek rest is definitely toolless. So with this one, you actually have to loosen the screw right here, but it will slide left and right, as well as up and down. I think the Barrett MRAD, it's right up there with Accuracy International, and so is Seekins. The only thing that's not toolless on the Seekins is the butt pad adjustment. So you can see I like to run my butt pads fairly high, try and keep the center line of recoil in line with the muzzle, or at least where I'm accepting recoil, in line with the barrel as much as possible, so I eliminate things like muzzle rise or muzzle dip and stuff like that. And I'm pretty picky on what type of muzzle brakes that I use. So trying to keep from getting too far off course, I would say that you couldn't go wrong with either Seekins, Accuracy International, or Barrett MRAD. They're all going to give you a really good amount of adjustability, and you're going to be able to get the rifle set up for yourself personally, physically, in the way that you're built. So as far as all that's concerned, I would give the win, I would call it pretty much a draw. I'm not going to say a win. But as far as like the Desert Tech goes, since it is a bullpup design, they can't, inherently, they can't really do a whole lot in terms of adjustability for the shooter, just because of the overall design of the rifle. So that's kind of where I would maybe give them a ding, for something that you might want to consider if you if you've got a weird overall build that or a huge dome. That might be something for you to consider. So anyway, moving on from there, let's see. Return to 0 per barrel by design. So, excuse me. As far as barrels that are set up this way, hang on. As far as barrels that are set up this way, where they actually thread themselves into the action, I have found that their return to 0 per each barrel to be extremely good. I'm not 100% sure why that is. I have my speculations, but usually you're not going to be off by more than 0.1 to 0.2 mils with either or with any of these, and that's really impressive. At 0.1 to 0.2 mils, that's, you're basically looking at, say, 0.3 to 0.6 inches at 100 yards, roughly. The Barrett MRAD and I think the Desert Tech, they're going to be somewhere around the, I think around the 1 MOA mark, basically no more than basically an inch away from their initial 0 point once you remove them and put them back in. Which still, that's very good. So, but that's definitely a big thing. Another thing about the ones that thread in is, even if they're locking mechanisms that actually hold the barrels in, if they fail, 99% of barrels are right-hand twist. So what that means is, if you look down the barrel through the breech end, the barrel is going to spin in a clockwise direction, looking at it from the top. Since the barrels screw in with a right-hand thread from the front, yeah. Sorry. Since they screw in with a right-hand thread from the front, the barrels tend to drive themselves onto the rifle even harder. So if your locking mechanism was to actually fail on any of these, you can still run the gun. And I think that is also a really big benefit. So anyhow, my voice sounds like it's about to try and go, but these are all things to really be aware of and understand for the switch barrel rifles, and what you might want to consider going from one to the next, and what certain companies have to offer and how they differ. But there's a lot of benefits into doing it. There's very few cons, I would say. But anyhow, hopefully that solved a whole bunch of questions for you guys. And like I said, as long as my voice will hold out just a little while longer, we're going to do a ballistic solver video and show you guys how to go ahead and go through and get them set up per each barrel. So anyway, that's all for now. Thanks.